Making it to the national finals. I'm Diana Owen. I'm a political science professor at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
Welcome and congratulations. My name is Tom Tinder and I'm an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
Yes, welcome. I'm Steve Franzik, a retired professor of political science from the U.S. Naval Academy.
And if you would each introduce yourselves and introduce your teacher.
All right. Thank you, judges. We are Unit 6 representing Team Indiana. We're from Hamilton Southeastern High School of Fishers, Indiana. My name is Ryan Everett. I'm the unit captain. And in the fall, I plan to attend Purdue University to study political science.
My name is Aryan Desai, and in the fall, I plan to attend the University of California at San Diego to major in computer engineering.
My name is Debin Jung, and I plan to attend Purdue University as well to study chemistry.
My name is Connor Wright, and I plan on attending Indiana University to study business and political science. And we are under the direction of Ms. Janet Chandler.
Great, thank you. So the question that we have for you today is question 2. President Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What disagreements did the founders have about a standing army, and are they relevant today? To what extent should there be an international U.S. military presence?" Please begin.
Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. wrote,
Millions of citizens are deeply disturbed that the military-industrial complex too often shapes national policy, but do not want to be considered unpatriotic.
Connor and I agree with President Eisenhower's sentiments. Before 9/11, the Department of Energy and Pentagon were the only U.S. government agencies with major military contracts. Since then, the number of U.S. agencies acquiring contracts has exponentially increased.
Military manufacturers such as Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics have acquired additional contracts to not only increase current arms supply, but to also aid the military in diversifying with new technologies for cyber warfare and artificial intelligence.
A strong military-industrial complex is reinforced by the spread of military contracts with private companies across multiple branches.
Ryan and I disagree with President Eisenhower's stance. Since World War II, collaborations between military arms and technology developers with the U.S. government has resulted in the advancement of civilian technology.
Inventions ranging from duct tape to the internet were first developed for military use. Without a military-industrial complex to ensure collaboration between the U.S. government and arms manufacturers, civilian technology development would lessen.
Our founders recognized the difficulty in balancing our national security while also protecting our rights and freedoms as citizens. James Madison adamantly opposed a large standing army and thought it would lead to further conflict, while John Jay disagreed.
Additionally, after the Revolutionary War and poor treatment by British troops, the founders were cautious and added the Third Amendment to our Constitution to prevent the military from forcibly occupying American homes. Framers also sought to avoid a dictator using the military to amass large amounts of power, which is why Article 1, Section 8 requires congressional approval for war.
Congress and the executive branch continue to debate who should control what parts of the military. Last year, President Trump ordered a strike on Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, which angered some in Congress who wanted the authority to approve such action.
Another check on military power involves who can be appointed to lead the Department of Defense. Former General Lloyd Austin was granted a special exception to lead the Pentagon.
Federal law stipulates a citizen must be in charge of the Department of Defense, which can include former members of the military, as long as they have been discharged from the military for 7 or more years, or receive a special waiver from Congress. This ensures the military protects United States citizens more than it shields itself from accountability.
Our fears concerning an overzealous military that suppresses rights of the people have decreased, although, as seen last summer with the heavy-handed uses of the National Guard, the threat remains.
In 2019, the Defense Department spent $732 billion to uphold domestic and international U.S. military presence. Since the United States is not presently in a state of war, the Pentagon should receive a smaller share of the federal budget.
The United States operates 800 military bases in over 70 countries, and some bases, in places like Okinawa, now lack strategic importance and can be consolidated or closed.
Connor and I agree the defense budget could be decreased, but believe it is important for the United States to maintain influence in every region around the world. Until very recently, enemies were nations, and the locations remained permanent, making surrounding the enemy a strong military tactic. But in the modern era, an enemy is no longer confined to land borders. It is important for the US to answer the call wherever and whenever necessary. As President Eisenhower said,
We do not keep security establishments merely to defend property or territory or rights abroad or at sea. We keep security forces to defend a way of life.
This concludes our prepared testimony, and we are now ready for follow-up questions.
Thank you very much for your statement. I think you brought up a very interesting point about the relationship of technological development to the military-industrial complex. Could you elaborate a little bit more about how the military-industrial complex contributes to technological innovation and address the issue of whether there are other avenues rather than the military to promote this type of development?
So to address the first part of your question, the first computer designed by Alan Turing was actually designed under a joint progress with the British military in order to crack the Enigma code during World War II. And that kind of shows the start of our advanced technological development rising through military development.
In addition to my,
go ahead, Connor.
thank you. In addition to what my colleague said, the military has helped with a lot of other smaller innovations over the years. And so one innovation that's important to people like me who enjoy hiking and don't want to carry as much weight as possible, or want to reduce the amount of weight they're carrying, is MREs, which are called meals ready to eat. And so the military perfected the technique of sealing packages so that they're airtight and also dehydrating food. So that was as easy as possible for soldiers to carry their meals into the battlefield. And if they ever got lost, then they would have plenty of food in order to survive.
I also think it's important to understand that the military industrial complex and its growth over the last 75 years or so after World War II has been largely due to the influence of lobbyists. And I think lobbyists have also played a major role in the rise in technology development in correlation with the military. As for other avenues that could do the same thing, there are many other departments under the federal government that use technology development and government contractors to advance their projects.
You stated that there are 800 military bases around the world, and it should be reduced. They should be reduced. What process or procedure would be followed to make those reductions?
Well, currently there is the Overseas Base Realignment and Closure Coalition that is promoting to these the closing of these bases. And though we do have a base realignment and closure process, that hasn't been done since 2005. And so we need to go through that process, but also think about work with this coalition, with the government, in order to see which bases should be closed and for what reasons.
In accordance with what my colleague Ben has said, the overseas base realignment and closure differs from the domestic base realignment and closure process in that no congressional oversight is needed to close a base. So it would be very easy for bases to be closed around the world without much process to go through.
Let's move to something broader from Unit 6. Legislation has been proposed in a number of states to make election law more strict. Why do you think we're having that discussion now? And do you think it's a good idea or not?
I think we're having that discussion right now because of the 2020 election. Former President Trump took some actions and had rallies and gave speeches after the election happened, declaring that there was fraud. And so Republican state legislatures have kind of seized the mantle now that he's out of power and made that their responsibility to make it harder to vote in the name of election security.
In states like Texas, we've seen voter ID policies, and in several other states, we're seeing similar processes evolve. And it's hard to justify how these systems are there if they're not being mandated nationwide. So these election stricter laws that we're discussing mostly come up to states involving a new diverse array of procedures in terms of how people vote.
I spent election day working as a volunteer precinct captain, and for my part, I walked away from election day thinking it had gone very well. And then personally, I was a little almost offended to see so much of the rhetoric around the election be so negative after the fact, because I had poured so much time and work into it to see locally and nationally the election as a whole kind of get dragged through the mud.
So you mentioned in your presentation about funding for the National Guard. I would like to follow up a little bit on about the National Guard. Under what circumstances, if any, should the National Guard be deployed domestically?
I think one of the main circumstances when the National Guard should be deployed is obviously when a local government requests the use of the National Guard. So one example that comes to mind where that did not happen was in Portland, Oregon, where the National Guard is basically forced upon the city of Portland, and they specifically said that they did not want the National Guard. But in other states, such as Minnesota, the National Guard was requested. The state actually wanted the presence of the National Guard. So that's an appropriate time to use the National Guard, I think.
Another appropriate time to use the National Guard would be during cases of natural disasters. We saw during Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy, the National Guard were called in and helped locate people that were lost and helped set up temporary settlements for the people who had homes that were damaged.
And going along with what my colleague has added just now, with that, there is also the threat of also other international threats that can come our way that can affect a multitude of people. And that is when the National Guard should be used, because then the president can have a good reason for why the National Guard should be deployed. And it isn't to be used at random occasion as he is Commander in Chief.
What's your opinion about the use of the Army or the military services, armed services in domestic activities, such as, it's my understanding that the military or some of the leaders in the military were in charge of the distribution of the COVID-19 virus vaccines. What's your opinion? Is that beneficial, or is that that should not be done? It should be done through other governmental actions.
The military has a very dense network of resources and a lot of capabilities to rapidly reach a lot of people around the country. So when discussing something like disseminating the COVID-19 vaccine, it makes sense to use an internal resource like the military to help make sure that that is spread evenly and equally.
Generally,
go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you. Generally speaking, I would say local, state, and federal agencies are more responsible for handling issues such as vaccine rollout or any related domestic threat. However, the military is by far and away the most equipped government entity to handle many threats. And I think in a situation such as the pandemic, where the main goal is getting life back to normal for so many people, the military had to be called in because they were the most ready group of people to fulfill the task necessary.
Your generation is one of the lowest in terms of political involvement in elections. What can or should be done about that?
I think programs like We the People are an important step in getting our generation involved in politics, because we're sitting right here, right now, talking about pressing issues and how we can solve them and how different philosophies can come up with different solutions to solve these issues. And I think if we got more people involved in civic education and civics courses in the high school level, and especially in the college level, then that would help increase civic engagement, because people would understand how the government works and the levers that they need to prod to achieve their desired results.
You talk in your opening statement about the fact that there are debates and a little power struggle between Congress and the executive branch over control of the military. And you give an example about of that during the Trump administration. Could you elaborate a little bit more about the nature of that debate and provide some additional examples?
So at the time when President Trump authorized the strike on General Qasem Soleimani, it was seen in his circle as a good idea, but Congress was offended that they were not given any warning, so they had no idea it was going to happen. But I think that was still an appropriate use of force by the executive branch because they're operating under the 2001 authorization use of military force. And sometimes you just don't have the time to alert Congress to what you're about to do and have them vote on certain issues. And I think that was one of those times where Congress said they wanted a voice, but there really wasn't the time to give them a voice and still carry out the appropriate action.
As Connor mentioned, the AUMF, which was passed in 2001, has been in action for over 20 years now and has spanned 4 presidencies at this point. And I think that there's real debate now in Congress about, I see my time has passed, and I continue. Thank you. I think there's real debate in Congress about potentially revisiting the AUMF or closing it down altogether as we look to bring troops home from Afghanistan.
Great, thank you. So now we'd like to give you a little bit of feedback on your presentation today. I thought you did a really nice job in addressing the question. This is not an easy question, and I felt you took a really sophisticated approach. I like the way that you started out with the MLK quote, and I also like the way that you divided your team so that you had people, representing different sides, taking different positions, and that you did that in a number of places throughout the presentation. I thought that was a really effective technique. It showed the breadth of your knowledge and that you had really explored the question from a variety of perspectives. I like the fact that you talked about the constitutional provisions related to the question and specifically looked at the Third Amendment to the Constitution. You also, I like the way that you talked about a historical context by mentioning the debate between Madison and Jay. I thought that I really liked, Ryan, the way that you brought in your personal experience at the polls in answer to the question. I thought that made, it brought the answer to the question to life, and it showed that you had real life experience with this, and, kind of gave your evaluation from what you had experienced, which I thought was really quite compelling. Just overall, I really like the fact that you brought up the idea of the military industrial context and the development of technological innovations that are used society-wide. That's a really interesting tact and take on the question. So overall, I thought really, really strong job and great job. By the way, those of you that are going to Purdue, I have several good friends that are there in the political science department and elsewhere, same as IU, and congratulations and good luck with the future.
I would just echo a lot of Diana's comments, and I just highlight a couple things. As a lawyer, you would expect that I really enjoyed your point counterpoint presentations on the various issues, because as lawyers, you're supposed to know both sides of the case that you're involved in, or all sides of the case, and so by you utilizing that, I'm expecting that you all are going to be future members of the legal profession. You did that very well. You have good legal training there. I also commend you for picking up on the questions that were in the units, within the unit, as it relates to our democracy, our constitutional democracy, as it relates to voting reform, and I thought you did an excellent job in handling that one. I did want to ask you, as much for my own education, but also to get your opinion in the discussion about the National Guard. My understanding that the National Guard is under the authority of the National Guard units are under the authority of the governor, and I thought that the activity that occurred in Washington, D.C., particularly when our most recent president went across the street from the White House and held up a Bible, that those were Army units, that those weren't National Guard units. But anyway, I wanted to ask you a question about that and didn't have the time. I just thought you did a really good job, and you came across very well as as having a tremendous amount of expertise in this topic. You told us where you're going to pursue your higher education degrees, which demonstrates your desire to have more education and to get more knowledge and to continue the leadership skills that you clearly demonstrated here today. I would just strongly encourage you and almost plead with you to please stay involved as good citizens in your local communities, in your state, in your education process as you go forward and in our nation, because we need to have leaders like you in our future. Congratulations to you. Good luck to you. Thank you.
I'm in the same position that some of you are, and that is that what other people said has really trampled on everything I might have said. I thought you did a wonderful job. Remember, you're in a kind of a rarefied atmosphere here in terms of being in the national finals, and hopefully you're going to act on that knowledge you have once you get out there in the real world. So congratulations and good luck to all of you.
Thank you so much.
I'd also like to recognize your teacher. Great job. Really, during the toughest of times, your team just gave a tremendous performance.
Thank you all.